Hey, what's going on guys? Wheelie YouTube here, back with another video, and welcome to the Banlist series for March 2013. I decided to wait until the end of the month before I started talking about it, but there's not really a lot to talk about. I think that compared to last format, there aren't nearly as many ridiculously overpowered decks that need to be nerfed considerably, and for that reason, the banned cards and the restricted cards and so forth aren't going to be as difficult a job. Nevertheless, the OCG will be something that we might be more concerned about, but I'm going to get into this today, and today we're going to be talking about the banned cards. Okay, so first of all, we're going to be talking about BLS. Is he going to be on every single one of my lists until he gets banned? Yes, he most certainly is, because I think this card is just ridiculous. It just completely changes games, albeit not ran in as many decks in this format as compared to last format. Last format, of course, you had effect failures in the main deck in pretty much every single deck because you were combating the likes of windups and injectors when they were at their full strength. But now, it's pretty much Agents and Chaos Dragons that would main deck BLS. Nevertheless, he's still a ridiculous card that can just change the game in a second and can pretty much win you games. Also, the fact that you can Reborn him is equally as ridiculous. So I think that it is long overdue that this card gets banned again. He was brought back a couple of years ago, and I thought it was the worst idea in the world. I mean, first of all, we thought it was like, oh, great, now everyone can main deck BLS. But they figured that he'd only really be around for one list, and the fact that he's still around just kind of makes me so annoyed. So I think they should just get rid of this guy for good. And I know he's really overpowering, and I know he helps everybody a lot, but I think people would feel a lot better, the game would be a lot more balanced if you didn't fear your opponent top-decking BLS for game. It's just a really frustrating card, and I think that it needs to go. Next of all is Monster Reborn, and I just want to say that although Monster Reborn has been around for a long time, people seem to have forgotten the fact that it is basically a free special summon from either player's graveyard. There is no other card in existence that comes even close to that, so people just seem to take it for granted that it's one of the Trinity, it's one of the staples alongside Dark Hole and Heavy Storm, and they don't really think twice about it. They just main deck it, and that's it. But if you think about how ridiculous the card is, you're wondering why it actually is still around. People just accept it as the status quo, but it is a ridiculous card. It just allows you to special summon any monster from either player's graveyard. Of course, BLS is the example, which is completely game-changing. I mean, even yesterday I was against one of my friends, and he basically had a full field of Chaos Dragons, and I had a Trag on the field, and I rammed into his BLS because he had 3,000 attack, and then I reborn his BLS and proceeded to banish his Relic Starting Spell Dragon. So, you know, that kind of shit is just, it just shouldn't be. You know, being able to reborn such a powerful monster. So, paired alongside BLS, I'm going to ban Monster Reborn, only because it's paired with BLS, but also it's just ridiculous for reborning a whole variety of things. So, Monster Reborn, I really feel that it needs to go. Next of all, we have Moulinglacia, the Elemental Lord, and this follows my rule that Konami will never ban anything that will kill a deck off completely. They'll just ban things that are kind of on the periphery that can be teched in other decks, such as frogs and stuff like that. Moulinglacia, the Elemental Lord, is an example of that. So, obviously, its main use is in Mermail decks, but you can also use it in frogs and a host of other decks, and that is the reason why it is actually worthy enough to ban. Never mind the fact that its effect is ridiculous. So it's really easy in any water deck to get 5 water monsters in grave, and taking 2 cards out of your opponent's hand isn't even the worst part of it. It's the fact that after you do that, you can activate Pot of Avarice and you can do a whole host of other things. More than likely, you're going to have an Abyss Megalo and a couple of other monsters on the field as well, and your opponent probably won't be able to come back from that, depending on the deck that they're using. In the case of Chaos Dragons, they might be able to just top deck something, but in the case of a deck that runs very few monsters, or that runs very few combo pieces, your opponent more than likely won't be able to do anything to come back from that. So, although he is somewhat of a situational card, and he does have his drawbacks, that when he's removed from the field, you skip your next battle phase, I still think getting the card out at the right time can be crucial and completely game-changing. And Mermails wouldn't be killed if Moulinglacia was removed from the deck. It would just slow down their OTK potential and so forth. So it wouldn't really hurt the deck or kill the deck completely, but it would certainly make it more balanced. So I think Moulinglacia, the Elemental Lord, as much as I love Mermails, needs to be hit. Okay, so speaking of Moulinglacia, the Elemental Lord, we next have Pot of Avarice. And Pot of Avarice is one of those cards that, in the current metagame, is basically the equivalent to a Pot of Greed. So if you go Moulinglacia and take 2 cards out of your opponent's hand, you can then activate Pot of Avarice and net a +1. If you go Magician Shark and bring on all your XYZ monsters, such as Wind-Up Carriers and Mighty, perhaps you even go into a Shockmaster first turn. When that Shockmaster is destroyed, or that Wind-Up Carriers and Mighty is sent to the graveyard, you can just use Pot of Avarice, put them back in the extra deck, draw into Magician Shark, and proceed to do it all over again. So that is why I think, in the current metagame at least, Pot of Avarice is one of those ridiculous cards that really shouldn't be around anymore. Although it is situational, and it's nothing like Pot of Greed, where you could just top deck and be like, aha, +1. But the game was stupid back then, let's be honest. Pot of Avarice is basically the equivalent of Pot of Greed nowadays. So you might be saying to yourself that in decks other than these, how is it possible to get 5 monsters into your graveyard quickly and efficiently? Well, the fact is that sometimes you'll just draw a Pot of Avarice in your opening hand and you won't be able to use it. We can't really help that. Konami has tried as much as possible to remove cards from the game that just net you advantage without any cost whatsoever, and that are pretty much splashable in every single deck. Pot of Avarice certainly isn't one of those cards, because Pot of Avarice doesn't work in cards with less monsters, it doesn't work in cards that mill a lot, such as Chaos Dragons. So it's not actually the most ideal card in most decks. But the thing is that in the decks where it does work, similar to Moulinglacia the Elemental Lord and Blackluster Soldier Envoy of the Beginning, it's ridiculous. And that is the reason why I feel that it needs to go. Yu-Gi-Oh! Nowadays is all about specific archetypes. And in specific archetypes, Pot of Avarice is a ridiculous card. Okay, so finally, yes, we have the Rescue Rabbit. I am going to ban this guy. I'm going to be really mean to the Rabbit archetype in general. And I'm just going to say get rid of him because he's super, super splashable. He's a +1. You can top deck him and just be like, yeah, win condition. How about that? And any card that is like that in the game definitely needs to go. So the other fact worth noting is, of course, the fact that the top 3 decks in the OCG all run Rescue Rabbit. We have the Evil Swarms, the Fire Fists, and of course Macro Rabbit itself. So if you play Rescue Rabbit in the Evil Swarms, you get Evil Swarm Ophion, you search up a Forbidden Lance for all your Evil Swarm monsters, and he's a 2550 beater who doesn't let your opponent special summon level 5 or higher monsters. That's pretty ridiculous. Then Elzar Lagia, of course, probably the best of the 3, where, you know, free Solemn, or Dolka, free negation of all effects. And then you have Brother of the Fire Fist Tiger King, who basically lets you set a spell trap in your deck. He sets his own version of Forbidden Lance during main phase 1, which he can use to protect himself. Also in the Fire Fist, if you get that at first turn, it just sort of really, really sets you up with Vorse Raiders. Because when you put the Vorse Raiders in the graveyard, you can just Diagusto Emerald them back into the deck. The same goes for any other deck that runs the vanillas. So Rescue Rabbit is ridiculous. I think it's been around for too long, it's topped too many events. It can main deck Macrocosmos, which is pretty much the bane of most decks' existence nowadays, including the decks that are not even out yet in the TCG, such as the Fire Kings and stuff like that. So the fact is that Rescue Rabbit will be dominating the format for months to come, unless something is done about him. And putting him at 1 won't really do the trick, because Hidden Arsenal 7 is coming out soon, and we're getting Diagusto Emerald. So that is why I feel that he needs to be banned. They just need to get him out of there, get him out of the game. Rescue Cat was in the game for long enough and just bothered us to death. So why not just get rid of Rescue Rabbit like they did with the cat, and just make the game a far healthier and far better experience for everybody. Okay guys, that is it for the video. I know that you won't agree with many of the choices that I've made. Nevertheless, I endeavour to pick cards that are both archetype general and archetype specific in order to kind of satisfy the masses. But in this case, I'm going with the archetype specific cards of Moulinglacia the Elemental Lord, who would pretty much be in Atlantean decks, but also Technic Frogs, and also Rescue Rabbit, who I'm just being plain mean about and just trying to get rid of as quickly as possible. For archetype general cards, and for cards that are just really, really splashable, and if top decked net you pluses, I'm going with Pot of Avarice, Monster Reborn, and BLS. Simply because I've hated BLS for a long time. I just hate when the opponent wins because of BLS. I don't consider it a win at all. It requires no skill to use, and it's just a stupid card. Monster Reborn, the same thing. You top deck Monster Reborn, you generally have a smile on your face. The same goes for Pot of Avarice if you've already gone Magician Shark, or if you've gone off with your Atlanteans and your Moulinglacia. So in the case of pairs, I've paired BLS and Monster Reborn together, and I've also paired Moulinglacia the Elemental Lord with Pot of Avarice, because together they're basically an unbeatable combination in their respective decks. Okay guys, that is it for the video. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to comment, rate, and subscribe as always, and be sure to keep a lookout for the remaining episodes in this series, in which I talk about the limited cards, the semi-limited cards, and the cards that could be taken off the list altogether. So that's it. I will talk to you guys later. Peace out.